Hello, everyone. Another book club from Women on the Move. And today is Thursday, October the 12th. The year is 2023. And we'll first start with introductions. I'm Cindy.
I'm Harriet.
You're muted, Linda.
I'm Linda.
And I'm Melody.
I'm Tammy.
I'm Tiffany.
And I'm Vivian.
All right, so we are the illustrious Women on the Move. We're missing one today, but we are going to continue to move forward tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to the host of tonight's book club, Miss Harriet, and she's going to tell you the title, and she'll take it from there. So Harriet, you've got the floor.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank everybody for their comments about the book. The book for tonight is Don't Cry for Me by Daniel Black. And I became familiar with this book. My brother is a pastor in Northern California, and in the summer they do a book reading. And this was the book, and once I read it, it moved me so much that I wanted to have it as my selection for book club. Also, Daniel Black is an author and a professor of African American Studies at Clark Atlanta University. He was born and raised and then moved to Atlanta, where he completed his degree work and then became employed at Clark Atlanta University. The book for tonight is a very touching book. It kind of is the story of a man who finds himself ill, terminally ill, and he has a strained relationship with his son, and he's writing letters to his son to tell his story. The characters in the book are Jacob Swinson, Esau Swinson, his brother, his grandfather, Father Abraham Swinton, his grandmother, his wife Rachel, and then his son Isaac. So the setting begins in Arkansas about the time of Jacob's birth in about 19, and then it parallels his life from then, and he tells the story. So at this time, I'm just going to call your name and ask you what character stuck out to you in the book. What was one of your favorite characters and why? And I'm going to start with Cindy.
Ooh, favorite character. I would have to say Jacob, who's writing the father who's dying from cancer. I would have to say Jacob. And you're saying why? It took so much courage for him to open up to write these letters, and I love the way he evolved emotionally through the book, like in terms of reading The Color Purple and understanding women more and opening up to his son and not understanding his son's identity, and then realizing other people were walking that same pathway. He was too ashamed to share what he was going through, but at least it opened his eyes. So I would say Jacob was my favorite character because I loved his evolution, and he stood by his standards, had a hard life, but he tried his best.
Tammy, who was your favorite character and why?
Well, I would have to say Jacob also. He wanted to be someone different, I think, to the people in his life, but he just struggled so hard to be that to them. And I felt so badly for him because of that. But he learned a lot throughout his life, but it didn't seem like he reaped any benefit from it with his loved ones, which I thought was, very sad about his situation. But he did learn a lot about himself along the way. So, but he was just a very endearing character to me for those reasons.
What about you, Tiffany?
Well, I think everybody collectively, because Jacob is the one we got to know the most because he was writing it. So I will start with, I loved that Jacob, he almost wanted to make excuses for being the way he was because that's how it's always been. But then because of his wife and his love for her and then his son, he wanted to be better. He wanted to be more. So he took it on himself to try to do better and to be better. I loved the grandmother's character. She wasn't with us for a long time, but I just felt like she had the unconditional love that grandmas have. I felt like she had the grace and understanding to excuse and forgive the grandfather, but to kind of take the boys under her wings and just absolutely adore them. And I think that's what grandmas do. So she was probably my favorite, even though she was only with us for a minute.
Linda.
I have to agree with Tiffany. The grandmother was my favorite character, and even though she wasn't in the story very long, but her impact was lasting from the beginning to the end. If you think about it, she was there to protect them from the roughness of the grandfather, and she was there to bestow that love that the grandfather withheld in his attempt to make them tough men in the world. She was the one that planted a seed of hope in her grandson about education. Her dream was to see somebody in her family graduate from high school, and she planted that. He didn't do it, but his son did. So and my favorite part of the book was when she was teaching him to bake a cake. Not only was she teaching him how to bake a cake, but she was teaching him life, how you have to stir up the batter and how tough it can be. That's how tough life can be. How you can put the sugar in it, and that can sweeten up how life can have sweet moments in it. So when she was teaching him to bake that cake, she was teaching him what he would have to go through in life. So she tried her best. What the grandfather did to hurt his morale, she tried to help build it back up, and she did. He may not have known it at the time, but not only did she build it up for him, but she built it up for her great grandson.
What about you, Melody?
There we go. I have to agree with Tiffany and Linda both. It was collectively all of the characters that were in the story collectively helped to change Jacob's opinion of different things, and I appreciated that, and I appreciated that he stepped back and recognized it. And I also liked the grandmother best. I also appreciated Rachel because yes, she definitely had her flaws and there was definitely some problems, but she kept trying to push through even when they'd kind of given up their marriage. She still allowed him to be a part and encouraged him to continue to be better. And I think it made both of them better for it because they both made mistakes. There was no doubt about it, but it was anyways, I don't know. It was really hard. I can't say that I really had a favorite, except for I agree. I loved the grandmother and what she did.
What about you, Vivian?
Well, I agree with Cindy and Tammy. Jacob, hands down, to me was the best character in my opinion because of the history he shared with his son to explain not only why he treated him the way he did, but why he was the way he was and what it took to make him the way he was. So I appreciated that part about him. And I also appreciated the learning that he did while he was writing and living his life. He grew more than physical growth. He grew mentally, and his knowledge of the world, and his relationships with his son, his wife, and his grandfather and his grandmother were all stepping stones, in my opinion, to his final moments. But I take my hat off to him as a person, to be the person he was, and to admit his faults to his son, and try to mend that relationship even in death.
Wonderful. I have a couple, again, like many of you have shared, the grandmother was one of those people that was very precious to me in the story, because my grandmother was like that. She's the kind that would bring you in and teach you how to cook this or make that. And there's one thing, and Linda talked about it when she was baking the cake, that I underlined, and I thought it was very, very poignant. It says, I whipped the butter quickly with a large stirring spoon, and Grandma cracked each shell so clean you could have put the egg back in it. She did this with one swift hit on the edge of the bowl. I tried it, but the entire shell crumbled. You hit it too hard. Gotta be gentle and firm. Most folks is one or the other.
Mm-hmm. She was teaching them life lessons.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And one thing that said to me was, she was telling him, you're going to find people that are one way or the other. You have to learn how to work with them. And that is one thing that Jacob really encountered. So I want to ask this question. Remember when the grandmother passed away and the grandfather stood up in the funeral, and he said, now I highlighted it where I put it. Well, basically the grandfather said, well, this is what happens, folks gonna die, and you better get right. And after that, they didn't even go to the repast for Grandma. They went home and went to work. So in that, what was Grandpa's solution or focus in life? What do you think from that?
Say the question again. What was Grandpa's?
What do you feel his focus was when Grandma died, and he basically said, well, everybody's gonna die, so you might as well live your life, be a good person, and keep going. And so then there was, he had that one moment at the gravesite when the bird was singing, and he was singing with the bird. But other than that, he showed no emotion. But he told Jacob, well, we got to go. Let's go home, get clothes on. We got to go to the fields. So what kind of lessons was he teaching Jacob in that moment?
I think that
I'll go ahead. I'll go, Tammy.
I think that some people believe if they work really, really hard, that they'll be granted, entrance to heaven. I think that they feel that hard work will reap them that reward.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think he was thinking, possibly. His focus was clearly on work, because that's what they did. I mean, I think he literally worked himself to death.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. I think that the focus, I don't know if it was as deep as what you said, Tammy. I didn't think that far about it. I just thought it's like, okay, it is what it is. She died. We've got to go back. We've got work to do, and let's just go do it. It's just like, okay, it happened, and let's keep on going.
Mm.
Another thing too, if I can add to that, back then, to be a man, you didn't show emotions.
Correct.
I think that's what he was raised on, instead of showing your emotions, keep going and keep working. But I'm sure that his reason for getting back out in that field really fast was so that he could grieve.
Correct.
Mm.
Correct. And
And
then
I
think
don't
of,
think I don't think they celebrated death the way we do now. I
right,
think it was, death is part of life. It
Right.
happens, you know, and him saying get right, it's like she was right with the Lord. We know where she's at. Let's go. It's time to, you know, move on. It's not going to do anybody good to stand here and cry. And like Vivian said, that's just how they mourned back then. It wasn't a 3-day festival like a lot of things that we do now. It's, you know, I think it was, it's done, and what's done is done. Let's move on. And that was his way of dealing with it. I don't think he showed a lot of loving emotion. I think he loved to the best of his ability. Again, he was taught by his father, and probably in a more abusive way than he taught his grandchildren.
right.
You know,
Exactly. And he was one through his motto. It's like a man provides food, he provides shelter, he protects,
Mhm.
you know, and the woman, it's like they're there for
Right.
the love and the hope.
Right.
So that
they had
was,
roles.
yes, exactly.
Mhm.
So he was fulfilling his role, but you know that he felt deeply because of the situation with his daughter. So we know he
Mhm.
deep feelings. So it could be, let's go to work, and he's out there in the field, and who knows, he could have been humming and, you know, but just working through his grief by physical labor.
But
And
they
I think
didn't grieve
when
openly.
the death of the brother Esau was
Yes,
about the only time he showed emotion, when he was on the
Mhm.
porch
that's
and
right.
the grandson came out and saw him staring in the field, but then saw him wipe away. So
Mhm.
I think he hurt, but like someone said, I think it was Vivian, he wanted to model what he thought being a man was. Man
Mhm.
did not cry. Man did not show all these emotions. They had to be strong and tough at all times, and that's what he was modeling for that child.
Right.
Well, if you noticed, even when he was sick, he still, you know, even though the doctor said, look, you need to stay in bed, he
Mhm.
still got up. He needed to provide for his
right.
family. And
Exactly.
that was his way of showing love. It wasn't, you know, I mean, we all show things differently, and it's trying to figure out that language of that person that you're with. And I think the grandmother knew that as well, but would we like it different? Yeah, I think sometimes we would, but I do think it was the best way he knew how to show his love.
Right.
And I think at the end, when if I remember correctly, the grandmother said, "Sometime I wish I never would have married him."
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think she may have had regrets because of his lack of showing love to his yeah, he may have shown love to his daughter, but something happened in that barn. She didn't
Oh, yes, that was,
something happened in that barn. But
right.
definitely did not show the kind of love he could have shown to to his sons in an effort to make them tough. So I'm wondering if she thought, if I had married someone who could show emotion, maybe that would have, my daughter would have been alive, or my grandsons would have, you know, I don't know. But I think she may have had some regrets about her life choice by
Mhm.
marrying him.
Of
Mhm.
course, because think how tough it would be as just how tough it would be for the grandmother. You have this man who's so tough, you know, your
Mhm.
daughter's pregnant, and then in the church service, you make her stand up and you just
Mhm.
shame her. And oh
Mhm.
my goodness, that was, woo, that was deep.
Mhm. And I wonder sometime when, especially when he had that faraway look when Esau died, if he was thinking about, if I could have been a better person, my daughter might still be here. The one part that I was talking about when he spoke at the funeral is at the bottom of page 57. And it says, we all got to go this way. Better get ready. He never dropped it. Neither did I. I felt it though, that grief stirring at the bottom of my belly. And so even Jacob wanted to express emotion, but because of the model of his grandfather, he said, you know, I'm not going to do it. And now I want to ask this question. How do you think the change in how men express emotion or show kindness and stuff to their families, has it evolved and changed from his time, from
Definitely,
Abraham's time to now? Do you see
definitely.
a change in men, or does it
Yes.
cause you to understand them better? Okay, take it
Well,
away.
yes, it's been a change, and it's for the better.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. Definitely. A lot of, and then
Good night,
it's a
Bella.
it's a cultural thing as well, because in some cultures they've always been very expressive, like in your Latin countries and your a lot of European cultures. The men are very expressive in terms of them kissing and showing physical expression to their sons as well as their daughters, but you see it a lot with the sons. So culturally, some people have always done that, but across the board, yes, because it's men hard. Don't show your emotions, be strong. But I love, to me, there's nothing better than seeing a man with his children by himself. And when it's a baby, oh my gosh, that just touches your heart, because it's like men can do that as well. They can take care of their children. And it's
Right.
beautiful to see when they do that, because moms need rest.
That part. Yes. And there was something. Do you remember in the story when Isaac was a little baby and he was crying and crying for hours and he could not be comforted? And his mom, Rachel, tried everything she knew. But the minute that Jacob picked up Isaac and laid him on his chest, Isaac immediately calmed down. He was so happy. And Jacob talked about the joy he felt feeling their hearts beat together. So he tried to do that. What do you think happened that he didn't continue to nurture Isaac like that?
I think a couple of things. What part of it is we go back to what is familiar and what we really know. So sometimes we have snippets of, it's like we're doing something out of the ordinary, but if we don't push ourselves, we will fall back into what's familiar. So I think that was part of it. And then also when Jacob saw Isaac, kissing like the doll, and he had more tendencies, and then remember he saw him kissing a boy. So when he saw that, that was to Jacob, that was like, that's taboo. And I think that also severed the relationship.
Yeah, he also was thinking back on what his grandfather did to make him a man, and he wanted to make Isaac into a man.
Right.
Long before he knew what Isaac's true identity was.
Correct.
To make him into a man. And that was the only way he knew how, was to be hard and to teach him to be hard.
And even with the trying to get him interested in various sports activities, and when that didn't work, that upset him. And was it? I mean, he just carried on. He wanted him to be the all-American boy, and that wasn't the path that he wanted.
Exactly. I know. And can you imagine how hard that was for Isaac? You want to please your father, and you're playing baseball and you're playing football, but that's not you, but you're doing it because it makes your dad happy. But eventually, you're not going to excel because it's so not you.
And I'm sure he wanted to, I'm sure he wanted to hear Jacob say, "I love you, son." I don't recall, I can't recall in the book where he said that.
Yeah.
Maybe in some of the letters, but I don't recall him verbally telling his son, "I love you, I'm proud of you." Not even at the graduation, when the son got ready to move away from home, he couldn't even give him a hug then.
Right.
Come on now. Couldn't pick up the phone to call.
Yeah.
So
And
to the son that was saying, I was such a disappointment to you.
But that was
That's
such
the
a
message
different
he's
time.
saying.
That's not what he was taught to do. I mean,
Exactly.
it's not like it was just, it came natural to him. He never received that love. He
That's
never understood it. He was never told. He was taught the exact opposite. So we moved from one generation into a huge swing into another generation. And
that
I mean,
that could have
Jacob
been
didn't
a
know to
choice.
do that.
That could have been his choice. He could have said, I know how my grandfather treated me. I know how I felt. And normally this is the path people would take. I'm not going to be that way. I'm going to be different. I'm going to
But
try
don't
to
you
make
think
it
that that's
better.
what he tried to do?
He tried,
In
but
learning, reading the books and doing
toward
the
the end.
movies and writing the letter, I feel like he came to a point where he said, I really don't want to be that generation, that person anymore. You know, I want to be this generation. But I mean, he was kind of in that middle spot where it's like, if I'm that generation, am I soft? Or am I really a man? You
Right.
know, am I the head of the family? Am I taking care of my business? Am I doing what I'm supposed to do? I mean, I kind of understand it. It was a tough spot for him to be in.
right.
mean,
And we need to go, not leave this club thinking every man was like that. Not every man was
No.
like that.
Oh, no.
I don't think so, no.
No,
So
not at all.
let's
And
definitely
you-
not think like that.
if you look at page 67, it kind of it talks about how he was feeling. It said, these were the kind of things I wanted to share with you. Man things. This was the last paragraph on page 67. Things a father ought to tell his son, but you weren't interested. Even as a little boy, you thought I was cold and mean. Perhaps I was, but I was a man. I was a man the way I had been taught to be a man. That is so tragic.
I just think it's so this book for me was so telling of how our influence, it doesn't matter whether it's our own children or someone, maybe a niece or a nephew, what we say, they're so impressionable, and that how we live our life is something that is shown. And we emulate that, and that's that was all he knew. And I get it. And what I think about this whole story is him coming to grips with the fact that more than likely he was never going to be able to share this letter, as we can tell, with his son. But he had to get that out to say, look, in my heart, I see what I did wrong and I'm trying to fix it, but I didn't know how.
Exactly.
And it wasn't until he actually did talk about the education and wanting to, read and hear other people's opinions that he realized, oh, maybe that wasn't quite the right way. And I don't know, it's just hard because you have to recognize it was a different generation, it was a different time. And that we can change from there. But it's so, it reiterated to me how communication, saying these things out loud to each other and saying, maybe I'm not quite doing this right, is so much better than just saying, oh, I don't think I'm doing it right, but I'm just going to stay shut down, I
Right.
don't know. That's
I think throughout this book, Jacob was in a constant struggle. A
yes.
struggle of so many different things, being a man, of nurturing his son, or maybe not over nurturing his son, and learning what his son was all about and learning how to deal with his son. He was in a constant struggle throughout the whole time that he was going through all of this.
And
Exactly.
it wasn't just, I'm sorry, Vivian, I didn't mean to.
No, you're fine.
It wasn't just for his son. You saw the struggle with his wife. You saw the
Correct.
struggle with him not going back to see his grandfather.
Correct.
You saw all of these struggles. It was like he was like looking at his life in this, this era. And I found that interesting. So I'm sorry, Vivian, I totally
No,
jumped in.
you're fine. That's fine. I'm glad you said that.
One of the most telling things was on page 65 when he said, I didn't know anything about love. I certainly hadn't seen it, mutual affection between adults, and I wasn't sure how it worked. But I liked the way it made me feel, warm inside, worthy of life, the way as a man's supposed to feel with a woman. And I never wanted to let that feeling in.
Mhm.
That's, think about it, a person all their life, never knowing what the tenderness of love really is.
Exactly. But it's like at least he was learning and he was expanding because he meets his wife, they get married, Rachel, but then they don't have a good relationship. And then she's drinking all the time, but she has her own pain. She's an educated woman and wants to expand that, but Isaac doesn't understand that, or excuse me, Jacob doesn't understand that. So then there's conflict there. He's attracted to that initially, but then when they're together, it's like that's intimidating because he's not an educated man. She is, but wasn't he an excellent provider? He learned that from his grandfather, and he provided the home even when they separated. And then he wanted to leave that home to his son, but when the son didn't want it, he's like, well, I don't need to be paying rent over here when I can be living in this house. So he was a good provider. He really was.
Right.
So what do you think some of the you can see some of the generational, I don't want to say curses, but things you saw passed on from generation to generation in both sides?
Lack of showing love, because grandfather didn't share that with his wife. The boys didn't learn it. And then Esau died when he was 11. So then Jacob doesn't know how to share that with Rachel. So, it was just passed down. No love, no one giving. Look how the grandfather treated his own daughter.
Also, total lack of communication. There was
Communication was huge.
two times in the book after the brother died, Jacob stopped talking completely. And then after the grandmother died, he said they would go for days in the house without speaking. And so, and then he did the same thing with the son.
Right.
Wouldn't contact the son, and the son wouldn't contact the dad. It works two ways. So,
and I think even go ahead.
Sorry, there was a part in the very beginning of the book on page 20. And when I read it, I actually stopped and I thought that this is the whole book right here, these two sentences. He said, we took pride in working because it's what we knew, what we did best. We never believed we meant much. And, he didn't. He wasn't raised being encouraged and loved and congratulated and, told what great job he did. It was do the job, do it good, and then you can be done. So I feel like he never felt like he had that self-worth. And then when he met Rachel, he felt self-worth, but he didn't know how to communicate. I think Linda hit the nail on the head. They just didn't know how to communicate. Whether it was the education or the upbringing or, society or the generation or all of it combined. It just, especially the men, I think it showed weakness.
When he read The Color Purple, it was a real eye opener for him.
Yeah.
And that opened a little door of communication between him and
Rachel.
Exactly. And I love the fact that she did leave it and it sat there for quite a while, but he eventually read it. So that showed a lot on his part. And then he realized, wow, there's so much I didn't know about women.
Which it opened up communication at that point. You could tell that was when it started, but it made me sad that she passed away so soon because I feel like she could have been part of that bridge to bring them back together, And I mean, I know that wasn't necessarily what the story was about, but it you could tell he was finally starting to get his mojo in a sense. He was starting to understand more things, and it was that aha moment, that bridge that all of a sudden, wow, he was worth something,
Right.
Do you remember talking about generational things that he said when he met Rachel's family? They were all drinkers. He said they drink from day to night. And I think that was Rachel's coping mechanism.
Correct.
Right.
Right.
Because it's what she knew. It's what she learned.
Exactly.
So,
And the same thing for him, you know,
To deaden the feelings.
mhm.
right?
Mhm, yeah.
And
And I-
his way of deadening the feelings was to work.
Mhm. Do
Provide.
do you think that if she had gone to college even after she had Isaac, things would have been different between them?
Yes.
I think it would have helped
Mhm.
an
She
awful
wouldn't
lot.
have that resentment that he held her from something.
Correct. It
Mhm.
would have helped her emotionally,
Mhm.
even because look at the grandmother state with the grandfather, because, you take your vows and people
Right.
committed and they stuck to the commitment. So it would have made it easier for her because she would have at least felt fulfilled.
Do you think that's why she had the abortions?
Yeah, she wasn't happy with him.
Mm.
I think she saw him as just being very mean. I mean, as you can see, she didn't see what he saw, which was I thought was interesting. He was more in tune to his own son than his wife was to a certain extent. He saw him as being different and wasn't sure how to handle it. And instead of he just assumed that she was seeing the same thing. And in reality, she hadn't seen it at all. All she saw was that he wasn't treating him right. And so in her mind, I feel like she saw him as not liking her son or children in general. Instead of because they didn't communicate, they just didn't understand it. It just shows me that communication is so important in so many different things, because what we think is not what other people perceive. We always take our own experience to that perception, and it can be completely different than what the original intention was.
Mm.
I
Correct.
think when he found out about the abortions, that was the final straw on his marriage. I think that sealed the deal. He was done.
Right. And then back then they didn't divorce. I mean, they separated, but they didn't divorce. And I know people, I remember one of my friends, we're basically the same age, and his parents separated years ago because the dad was, an alcoholic and mom was tired of putting up with it, and they had 7 children. And then she's like, oh, the kids are all taken care of now. I've got to go. I've got to take care of me. I'm not staying in this anymore. But they stayed married until each of them died, and they had a good friendship later on. But yeah, they never divorced. And a lot of couples, they wouldn't think of divorcing, but they won't stay under the same roof together.
I kind of agree with what Melanie said about Rachel seeing Jacob maybe as not being a loving father. He was a good provider, but he
Right.
wasn't a loving father. So I wondered in the back of my mind if the abortion she had was her way of saying to herself, I can't control the finance because he's working. I can't control my living condition. I want to go to school, but he won't let me go to school. But I can control my body.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
This is
And she
what I
could-
do have a choice in. Mhm.
And she couldn't control him either. So I
Right.
mean,
Right.
Well, was that around the same time that did they know that drinking alcohol caused birth defects? Around
Oh,
that time?
probably
Back
not.
then,
No.
not back in the 60s.
I would guess not.
Yeah.
Because a lot of that started to come out. I remember when, like in the 70s, they were talking about how alcohol and smoking can affect your baby, and they could have low birth weight and all these other.
Yes.
So I
Mhm.
remember that being kind of in the 70s when they started talking about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. My sisters and I are all 70s babies, and my mom smoked with all 3 of us and was told it would never, she was told it wouldn't hurt the baby. So, alcohol and cigarettes didn't make just don't do drugs is all she said that they had told her.
Mhm.
So.
So yeah, so if you could rewrite of this book, what would it be?
You
Would
Say
cut
that
out-
again, you
You
cut out.
cut out, Harriet.
Okay, if you could rewrite the ending of this book, how would you rewrite it?
That's a big question. I don't wanna go-
Melody,
I would have, I mean, as he was finishing the letter, I would have liked to have heard a knock on the door.
I know where they,
And
yes.
there was his son. And just
Mhm.
because I think it would have healed his son, it would have also at least given him peace. And that would have been all it had to be was a knock on the door and there was a son. But that would have been my choice.
Exactly. I agree with Melody. I just want to read this aloud. I copied this in my notes because I just thought it was so profound. It was towards the end where the final passage, don't cry for me, to the son. I've cried enough for myself. Nurture good sprouts and toss unwanted weeds from the seeds I planted. Weeds have valuable function, teach you what to avoid and not embrace. Finally, I leave you this charge. Live your life freely, Isaac. Rise above our history and be your unapologetic self. Just remember that I meant well, even in my failure. I truly meant well. Your father.
Yeah,
I love that ending. I thought it was so powerful. But yes, we would
Mhm.
have liked to have seen them come together and,
yes,
known that, but powerful.
right. Now, if he were to write a sequel to that book, I would love to see how Isaac took in that information and what he did with it. That
Yeah.
would be a good book.
And did he ever go back to the property? What happened to the property?
Right.
I know. Here's this property. And it's like,
Now, he
Part of
did
their
go back to
bloodline.
put-
It
he
is
went
their
back to put
history.
the tombstones on the mother and the brother's grave. So he
yeah.
did go back.
Right. He purchased those.
Mhm.
But he, in the end, he
But
told
Jacob did that,
his
didn't he?
son that this is yours, this is
Jacob did
your
that.
legacy,
Right,
you
Yeah.
know,
mhm.
and we don't know what happened to that.
Correct.
right.
My assumption is that somebody would have found him and then this letter also would have been there, but that's what I want to know. Tie up the story for me.
I know. Well, guess what? If there's never a sequel, we can make our own sequels in our heads.
True.
I just thought it was so important because in African American culture, especially if you live in the rural South, one thing that was told to Jacob and Jacob told Isaac is never sell the land.
Right.
Always keep the land. That is the thing that is more valuable than anything else. Keep the land. And I think that's very powerful. And last question, because I know we have 6 minutes. If you could recommend this book to one person, one male in your life, would it be?
I already did. I recommended it to my son because he has 2 boys that he's raising. And I felt like, even though I think he's doing an excellent job and he has a good, strong relationship with him, I just felt like this book will also just give him a little bit more guidance on making sure that he does what he can to keep that relationship strong with his sons.
Anyone else? I think I would recommend this book to my husband because I think this gives men a lot of insight into why some of the things they do, some of the, what makes them who they are. And I think this journey, Jacob's journey, is could be enlightening to any man that read the book.
Exactly. I would recommend it to my friend who I just shared. Both of his parents are deceased now, but I would recommend it to him. Yeah, because growing up in a household where you see your dad who's an alcoholic and is verbally abusive to your mom, and you just want to get away from that, and there are 7 children in the house. That's a lot. That's a lot.
Mhm.
I'd probably recommend it to my husband, but he doesn't read a lot of, uh, you know, fiction. He's just more of a nonfiction kind of guy.
Mhm.
I think I would,
Go ahead, Linda.
oh, I'm sorry. I
No,
would
you're good.
recommend it to a male leader at my church that I go to, because he is so hard on the LG lifestyle, and just so that he can see the feelings, the empathy that's played all through this book, the pain,
Mhm.
and I hope that, to change his mind.
Yes.
Harry, you ask hard questions.
Yes, you do, but they're good. She asks probing questions.
Yes.
I think if I had to pick one person, the only person I can think of that I would choose would be my first husband, my oldest son's dad. When we split up, we were high school sweethearts. And then when we split up, Jeremy was just 3. And I told him, I said, every choice you make, every single decision you make for the rest of your life will affect your son. Be careful in the choices you choose. And I feel like he never really listened to that from me, because I was the horrid ex-wife, of course. But I think if he were to read this book, he may see some of his choices in the book. Maybe not quite as harsh, but and think, okay, I'm still young enough to undo some of this. So I may mail it to him. I hadn't thought of that. His birthday is actually coming up next month. Oh, that'd be so fun. That'd be so awful. It was a good book.
I'm not sure. I don't know right now. I really have to think about that. It was a tough question.
I feel like all of the men, and I can share because Melody and I are in the same family. I feel like all of the men in our family, from Papa, who's the matriarch, to my husband, her husband, and Uncle Mike, were the fathers, to the grandsons that are now becoming fathers. They're just all so loving and accepting, but they're also Christ-centered too. And I think that has made a big difference in generations,
Amen.
where I think men would go to church, but I don't think they were, and I don't think it's just men. I think people would go to church, but I think some people really weren't in relationship with the Lord as much as they are now. It's not as accepted. It wasn't as accepted as it is now. And I just feel like in our family, I just feel like the men are just really, really fantastic. I'm really, really, really blessed and very, very grateful.
They can work
That's
on
beautiful.
communication
Yeah.
a little bit.
What's
I
that?
think-
They can work on communication a little bit, but
Yeah,
not.
I thought the
But
truth.
but they're loving in their communication too. I mean, they're
And
not.
with
It's
the kids and their
yeah.
grandkids, and yeah.
But
Well,
uh,
I know for me, my father was his own person, but I had the opportunity. God blessed me with a great father-in-law. And so from how my father-in-law interacted with my husband, and how my husband interacted with my sons and then the grandsons, there is a lot of love and caring. Again, it's the communication piece. But overall, you like Tiffany was saying, you can't beat it when a man is truly sold out to God and wants to emulate the life of Jesus.
Amen.
And that's me. That's it. I'm done. I got another meeting.
Guess what? That was a
was
beautiful
good.
wrap, Harriet. So thank you for recommending this book, Don't Cry for Me. So thank you for joining Women on the Move Book Club. That's a wrap for tonight.